In this video, we're going to show you how to install an exhaust manifold on your Ford Mustang located on the driver's side. Now along the driver's side of the engine here, we're going to find our exhaust manifold just below the valve cover. Now we have 3 ignition wires going down to our spark plugs, and what we want to do is we want to separate those. And I'm going to do one at a time. I'm going to grab that and wiggle this off. I'm going to pull this up. I'm actually going to use a Sharpie marker, and I'm just going to write on this to what spark plug I pull it off of. So I'm just going to write number 1 on this. I'm going to go ahead and tuck that up out of the way. Then I'm going to go to the middle one, pop that off, and I'm going to mark that as number 2. Now I'm just writing this in the order that I'm popping these out in from front to back. This is not telling us the ignition process or anything like that. Just going to make it easier so we can get this installed on our reassembly without messing up our wires. Just tuck those up to the side. Now on either side of the exhaust manifold ports, there's 3 ports. There's going to be a stud and a nut on either side. So we have 6 of these to loosen and remove. I'm going to go ahead and spray a little bit of spray solvent on there, or rust penetrant actually, to go ahead and assist us in loosening these here. I'll get to those 2 in the back. I normally want to go ahead and let that set for about 10 minutes. Now we're going to use our 13mm socket on our nuts here on the manifold. All right, so we have the 2 nuts on the front flange loose. Now we're going to continue to do this process to get all of them undone. I'm going to mix between wrenches and things like that because we're going to have clearance issues with certain things. So use whatever tools you have to get in there. I'm going to the rear studs right now on this. We have the oil dipstick tube in the way of one of those, so we're probably going to use regular wrench on that one there for clearance reasons. Now we skipped over this one right here because we have the oil dipstick tube kind of in the way of that stud, and we're probably just going to unbolt that dipstick tube and move it a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and break the rest of these free first. Okay, so we have 5 of them loose. Now the oil dipstick itself has a bracket that comes over to the side of the valve cover. Now if we follow our bracket over from our oil dipstick, it comes over and there is a bolt right here that goes in. We're going to go ahead and remove that. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to use an 8mm socket here. And spin that bolt out. Now that does give us some mobility here to go ahead and just move that dipstick over to the side. I'm going to see if we can get our socket in there. And we can, so that really made a world of difference to try and work on this. All right, we successfully have all 6 nuts loose on the exhaust manifold. Okay, we have all 6 nuts off of the studs. Let's go ahead and move to the bottom side of the vehicle. Now on the bottom side here, we have 2 studs and 2 15mm nuts. We're going to use our swivel with a socket. Go ahead, loosen and remove these. Now we did spray these down with some rust penetrant before tackling these here. Something you definitely want to do. With these nuts removed, let's go ahead back up top. I want to reach down here. I'm going to grab our exhaust manifold. I want to work this off of that pipe down below a little bit. So just kind of reach down. And it can be a little bit of a process here. You also want to be careful of your spark plugs as well. All right, now we have the exhaust manifold off of the studs. Work that off of the down pipe down there. Now that we have our exhaust manifold loose and off of the down pipe, we're just going to lift it up off and we're going to kind of work it down below and set it in place. We're going to try and pull this out from below now. Now back underneath here, go ahead and grab that exhaust manifold. Work this down and drop that out. Now our replacement exhaust manifold has a threaded port on the front of our front tube here. Now if your vehicle doesn't have this, well, we're going to go ahead and put a cap on it here that is supplied with the unit. I'm just going to go ahead and tighten this down. Now we have this pipe, or we have the exhaust manifold in our vise. We set it up in the vise so that the flange is not damaged or marked up. And you want to go ahead and tighten this down. Once that's on there good and tight, go ahead and remove the manifold. And let's go ahead and install the unit. Now on our downpipe flange right here, I want to go ahead and inspect the inside of the flange. I'm just going to use a rag, and when I say inspect, you just want to feel for any burrs of rust, any nuggets, anything that could prevent a nice proper sealing of the new manifold to this pipe. So wipe it down, run your hand inside, make sure it's nice and clean. Run your hand around the inside and outside to make sure that it's not cracked or crumbling apart in your hands. Ours feels really good. Now we're going to go back up top. We need to pull a gasket off the side of the engine. Back up on top, we have our exhaust manifold gasket. I'm going to go ahead and work this off. Now around the perimeter of each of these exhaust ports, you can see we got 3 of them here. I'm just going to use a rag with some spray solvent. And I'm going to go ahead and just wipe down the carbon buildup around the perimeter here. Now the gasket itself was aluminum, so that didn't leave any remnants of anything, which is fantastic. But we're just going to go ahead and clean this up. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but you do want to go ahead and clean it up a little bit. Now, if any of these studs happen to unscrew from the cylinder head while you were removing the nuts, that is not critical. You can go ahead and remove the nuts and thread the studs back in. In our case, all the nuts came off and we're able to leave the studs in place. Now everything looks good. Next thing we want to do is go ahead and install our new gasket. All right, get that gasket pressed up into place. Now that we have our gasket in place, let's go up underneath and feed our new manifold up and into the bay. Go ahead and feed the manifold up. Let's go ahead and grab that manifold. I put the flange inside the downpipe down below, and now I want to go ahead and kind of manipulate this around a little bit. Push down on the exhaust and get these studs to line up. There we go. Beautiful. Now we have the manifold in place. We're going to go ahead and start all of our exhaust manifold studs, or our nuts on the top on the studs. Once we get all these started, we're going to come back and just snug them all down. Now on the nuts for our exhaust manifold, there's going to be a particular torque sequence that we need to tighten these in. We're going to start on the center tube here, and we're going to start at number 1. 2 is going to be the stud to the left of the center tube. Number 3 is going to be the front pipe inner stud or nut. 4 is the outer forward nut. 5 is going to be on the rear tube, but the inner nut. And 6 is the outer one in the back. Now we want to go ahead and torque these to 24 foot-pounds. Okay, let's get to number 2. Number 3. Number 3. Let's get number 4 here. Let's go ahead and get number 5. And then we'll get number 6. We're now going to install our 8mm bolt here for our oil dipstick bracket. Now once that bolt bottoms out, you're just going to snug it gently, so we're bottomed out right now. Make sure that's just good and snug. Our next process we want to do is we're going to go ahead and install our ignition wires while we're here. So let's do that next. I'm going to go ahead and grab our number 3 ignition wire. Go ahead and route this down. And we want to route this down to our rear spark plug, line that up. And you want to press it on. You want to make sure that you feel it snap on to the spark plug. Now we're going to grab our number 2, bring that down. I'm going to get that onto our middle spark plug here. And then take our last one here, line that up, and push that on. Now we have all of our bolts up top torqued. We have all 3 ignition wires installed. Let's go down underneath and finish our installation down there. On the downpipe flange here, we had some downpipe studs. We did not install them until now because it made for a much easier install process for the manifold itself. Now what we're going to do is we're going to grab the exhaust and we're going to gently pull this down a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and install our upper stud. So we're just going to feed that stud up. And we'll get this up and over the catalytic converter. And get that started in there. On the end of the stud, we can go ahead and use our 7mm socket and tighten that down. So go ahead and snug that stud into place. Let's go ahead and get the lower stud in next. And I'm simply going to use my 7mm with my ratchet. Go ahead and snug that in. Next, we can move the exhaust flange up onto the studs. Install a washer. Install a nut. Simply repeat that process for the upper stud. Let's go ahead and torque down the lower flange nuts to 30 foot-pounds. At this point here, you want to hop into the vehicle, start it up, and check for any exhaust leaks. If everything is nice and quiet, you're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.